My name is Anna Cooper and I am 60 years old. The morning my grandson asked to live with me, the winter light over the river broke into long shards on my kitchen floor, and the kettle sang like a faithful bird. He stood at the threshold of my small, tidy house in the old part of town, thin in his navy hoodie, eyes rimmed with sleeplessness that did not belong on a 14-year-old's face, and he said, very carefully as though each word might shatter, "Grandma, can I stay here? Not just tonight. For real." I put down the mug I'd been warming with hot water and watched the steam thin and vanish. I have spent my life in this house, the oak banister bleached by 30 summers of sun, the dent in the hallway where my son, Michael, once rammed a toy truck hard enough to leave an imprint that looks like a comet. I thought I had known the weight of silence in this place since Michael died. I was wrong. The weight of a child trying to be his own savior is heavier, Evan, I said. Come inside. He came in, shoulders folding like wings that had been beating against the wind for too long. I made eggs and burnt the toast because my hands would not stop shaking. He ate like someone who hadn't been offered breakfast in days, head down, fork steady. When he finished, he lifted his eyes. They are Michael's eyes, storm gray with a ring of blue like a distant shoreline you can almost touch, but never do. He said, she's going to tell the court I want to live with her. She, in our house, had recently come to meet my daughter-in-law, Kelsey. My son married her 12 years ago under an arbor of eucalyptus and lights. I wore a plum dress and cried into a handkerchief Michael tucked into his pocket, because he knew I would. Kelsey was beautiful then, all champagne hair and quick kisses on my cheek. She laughed easily, but it was always a laugh that asked to be watched. After Michael's accident, an intersection everyone said was safe, a truck whose brakes failed, a phone buzzing in a lunch bag they never recovered, grief rearranged us. For me it arrived like weather, a permanent climate. For Kelsey it arrived like hunger. Have you told her you don't? I asked Evan. He stared at the table. I did, she said. I'm confused. She said she'll fix it. She said. He swallowed. She said I owe her loyalty. I thought of the nights I sat on my porch with the blanket Michael used for picnics, the fabric smelling still vaguely of crushed grass, and how grief has a way of rearranging the house even when you've put every photograph back exactly where it used to be. I thought of Evan's birthday last month, a cake she posted with a caption about perfect sons, and how in the background you could see the corner of a wine bottle and the face Evan makes when he is bracing for a voice he can't control. Do you want to tell me what happened? I asked. He took out his phone, placed it face down on the wood between us as if it were a truce. I will, he said. But I want you to promise something. What? That you won't make me go back there tonight. I am 60. And promises at this age should be careful things. But there are promises that are not choices so much as recognitions of what your bones already decided. I promise, I said. He exhaled, the kind of breath that feels like a first step onto clean ground. Then he talked, slowly, messily. He told me about nights when the house turned into a maze of bottles and apologies, about the way love can sound like a checklist, about the man who started coming around 3 months after the funeral, and the arm he kept around Kelsey's waist like a claim. He told me about passwords and how Kelsey once took his phone to make sure you aren't talking to bad influences, and how, when he asked for it back, she smiled and said, in this house, privacy is earned. He told me about the time he came home to find the living room full of people laughing at a video of him, filmed secretly while he was trying to practice a eulogy for his father, and his voice broke. He told me about a sentence she used often, we are a team, which, translated, meant do not contradict me. After he finished, the kettle had gone cold. I poured it out and filled it again. We have a hearing on Friday, he said. She filed to make it all official. Full custody. She told me I don't have to worry because she'll tell the judge what's best for me. And what do you want? I asked, though I already knew. Sometimes the asking is the ritual that allows the truth to stand upright. He lifted the phone, thumb hovering over the screen. I want to live here. I want peace. And I have something. What kind of something? My voice tried to be steady. It almost was. He turned the phone over and tapped open a file. I saw a thumbnail, a hallway washed in lemony light, the edge of a kitchen table. A glass in someone's hand. I heard a voice Kelsey's honeyed and soft at first, then tightening like a snare. I heard my grandson's voice, younger even than he is when he is scared. I heard words that changed the air in my kitchen. You will tell the judge you want to live with me. You will say it clearly. If you don't, you know how this goes. He hit pause. The house held its breath. Last night, he said. She didn't know I left my phone on the sill. She thinks I'm easy to manage because I'm quiet. He looked up at me, and the look undid me. I am not easy to manage. There are moments when love reaches into your chest and rearranges your ribs so your heart can grow. I reached across the table and took his hand. You brave boy, I said. We went to the hearing with the river wind at our backs and the sky the color of old iron. The courthouse steps are cracked in places where winter keeps its secrets, and the pigeons there have learned to hop with solemn dignity, among people whose faces are practicing being without expression. Inside, everything smells like paper that has been argued with. Kelsey arrived late, sunglasses big enough to be a mask. A navy sheath dress that told the room she belonged in, rooms where decisions get made. The man she calls her friend waited by the door, not daring to enter but radiating interest like heat. The judge was a small woman with silver hair tucked as neatly as the words she spoke. Her nameplate read Hartman. And I thought of how names converge sometimes with duties, a heart and a man, and the cleaving line between. We sat, papers rustled. Our lawyer, a woman named Priya with gentle eyes, said good morning. Kelsey's attorney, all patent leather and cologne that could file its own motion, said the same. We began. Or rather, the machine began. And we stood inside it like people who had reheated coffee too many times, and were pretending it still tasted the same. Kelsey talked first. She is good at talking. Her voice can rise like a singer's when she wants it to. She described a home she had curated, a schedule she had crafted, a life she had saved from ruin with the stalwart patience of a widow, who never once allowed her grief to touch the fabric of her strength. She spoke about routine and stability, about the dangers of uprooting a child, about the nobility of hard standards. When she reached the part where she said, "My son wants to live with me, Your Honor," she placed a hand on her chest as though it were dangerous to let it rest anywhere else. The judge turned. "Evan," she said. "Is that true?" Evan looked at me. The room dialed in on the triangle of his face, my face, the judge's face. Then he raised his phone like a lantern. "Can I show the recording from last night?" Time has its tricks. It stretched then like taffy. The judge's eyebrows climbed, not in surprise, but as if ascending to a clearer view. "We will consider any evidence relevant to the child's stated preference," she said. "Ms. Hartman?" She nodded to the clerk. "Let's hear it." Kelsey's attorney objected. Words like hearsay and context and inadmissible were flung like confetti. "You are supposed to pretend is not sticking to your coat." The judge listened, then said, "Overruled for the purpose of this hearing. Proceed." Evan walked to the front with a steadiness that made me remember the first time. He crossed the street without holding anyone's hand. He placed the phone on the little evidence shelf, and the clerk connected it to the small speaker the court uses for body cam clips and 911 calls. It was an unassuming device, the kind of speaker you might bring to a picnic. It filled the room. We heard the kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator like a low tide. We heard Kelsey pour something into a glass. We heard Evan ask, "Do I have to say it like that?" We heard Kelsey answer, "You have to say what's true." Then we heard the hinge creak, his door, and the soft near laughter in her voice turn into something precise and sharp. "Listen to me, Evan, you will not embarrass me. Do you understand? I have enough on my plate without managing your grief. You will tell the judge you want to live with me, and you will not mention the nights I go out because that is grown-up business. When grown-ups have friends, it is not your place." There was a pause long enough for a child's heart to make a decision about tomorrow. His voice so careful said, "What if I want to live with Grandma?" A sound glass on counter, a breath through teeth. "You want to make me the bad guy, is that it? You want the world to think I'm failing you? Because I will not allow you to align yourself with people who undermine me. Grandma doesn't. Grandma doesn't know what it takes to raise a boy into a man. Your father, God rest him, left me with too much to carry. Don't you dare add to it." We are a team. Teams do not defect. The clip ended there. Evan, having knocked his phone with his elbow in his hurry to obey the command to wash his dish. The room's silence had an edge. The way winter air can carry the shape of a storm before the first snowflake falls. Kelsey's attorney cleared his throat and spoke about context again. Kelsey, without the sunglasses, stared at the carpet pattern as if she could reorder it with her eyes. The judge said nothing for a moment. Then she leaned forward. "Thank you, Evan," she said. "You may return to your seat." He walked back in the same upright line. He sat, and his knee touched mine. And in that small contact I felt the tremor of a boy who had set his own boundary and was waiting to see whether the world would punish him for it. The judge turned to Kelsey. "Miss Cooper," she said, and I saw Kelsey flinch at the name that was no longer hers but mine. "Would you like to respond?" Kelsey lifted her chin. The mouth she paints a perfect rose every morning found a different color now. "We have been through a lot, Your Honor," she said. "Grief makes us say things. That was me being human. My son knows I love him. He knows I fight for him. She wavered. He's just confused." The judge nodded, emotion not of agreement but of cataloging. "I understand grief," she said. "I do not misunderstand coercion. I will not pretend the hearing ended there. Life never resolves as quickly as a story, and courts least of all. There were more words, more paper, more arrangements proposed and amended. But when the gavel finally tapped the air and the room remembered how to breathe, we walked out with a temporary order that said Evan could live with me while the investigation continued. Temporary is a word that can hold a lifetime if you carry it carefully. We stepped into the iron-colored afternoon. Kelsey swept past us, eyes dry, heels efficient. She did not look at Evan. The man at the door made himself a small shadow. We walked home along the river. The geese cut letters across the water that I could not read. Evan held his phone like a talisman, then slipped it into his pocket and looked up at the sky as if for the first time in months. He had permission to scan the whole of it. "Grandma," he said after a while, "do you still have the sweater Grandpa wore to the lake?" "In the cedar chest," I said. "It still smells like wood smoke. Can I?" He paused. "Maybe later, of course, at the house. I made soup with barley and carrots because that is what you make when the body needs reminding that it can be filled with something warm." Evan stood at the counter with a pencil and did his homework. The ordinary miracle of algebra, cutting neat pathways through numbers. I found the sweater and draped it over the back of the chair near the window, where Michael used to read on Saturday mornings, foot propped against the sill. The newspaper tented like a sail. I opened the window a crack so the winter air could cut through the stale grief and make it honest. After dinner, Evan went to bed in the spare room that shouldn't still be called Michael's but is, and I washed the bowls and thought about the recording, about the courage it takes to lift the truth up like a lantern, knowing it might draw moths as well as travelers. I thought about the way Kelsey said team, as if love were a sport with rankings and penalties. I thought about my son and the last voicemail he left me, the one where he said, "Hey, Mom, we'll come by Sunday. Evan wants to show you something he drew. It's a map. A map, I have learned, is most valuable after you are lost." At 9, the phone rang. Unknown number. I considered letting it die on the counter, but the night had already held enough cowardice. I answered. Anna, Kelsey's voice, low and bitter as coffee left too long on the burner. "Enjoy your little victory?" "This is not a victory," I said. "It's a boy finding air. He is my son. He is also my grandson. And he is also himself." A breath hissed across the line. "You have always wanted to make me the villain." "No," I said softly. "You have always wanted to be the only hero." She hung up. The house returned to its own heartbeat. I went to the doorway of the spare room and watched Evan sleeping. The sweater clutched like a shoreline. In sleep he looked younger, the lines of vigilance erased for now. I stood there until the heat clicked on and the ducks spoke their small language. Until the moon cleared the birch and sent a white coin of light spinning across the carpet. I thought of promises. I thought of what it means to raise a boy into a man in a world that is full of rooms where people practice being without expression. I thought, simply, that in the morning I would show him how to make my grandmother's pancakes. The ones that are crepe thin and require patience. and how patience is a way of telling someone you expect them to be here. Not just now but later. In the morning we ate those pancakes. And he smiled with his whole face, and the day did not feel like a judgment. It felt like a beginning. But beginnings, I have learned, are also the place where the people you have left behind try the hardest to call you back. 3 days later, the social worker came by with a clipboard and a softness I recognized as the professional version of kindness. The kind you use like a blanket you know you must fold and take with you. She asked me about routines. She asked Evan about school. She asked whether there were any concerns about alcohol in the house, any firearms, any medications not locked away. She asked Evan what he wanted his life to look like in 6 months. I want, he said, and paused. He looked at me the way a sailor looks at the horizon, not for rescue, but for confirmation that the line is still there. I want to be able to come home and know what kind of night it's going to be. The social worker wrote something, then looked up. That's a reasonable wish, she said. That night, while we were washing dishes, Evan said. She'll be angry, yes, I said. Anger is a place people go when they can't bear the country of their own shame. He blinked. That sounds like something Grandpa would say. It's something your father learned the hard way, I said, and he did not ask me to explain. Some stories are shared better by the light they throw than by the words themselves. When the second hearing came, there were more papers and more words and a different courtroom that smelled of lemon cleaner. Kelsey spoke with a polished sadness, the kind bred in places where tragedy is a performance given at a lectern. Her attorney produced character witnesses who said she loved her son and kept a tidy house, and attended every extracurricular though none of them had been present at night. Our lawyer spoke about patterns, not snapshots. The judge listened as if she were translating a language only she could hear. At the end, Judge Hartman took off her glasses and folded them. This case, she said, is about a boy who is grieving and a mother who is grieving and a grandmother who is grieving. Grief is not a license to choreograph another person's voice. Evan has expressed a clear preference. He has provided evidence that his preference has been pressured in ways this court does not condone. The temporary order stands while we finalize a custodial plan prioritizing his stability. Kelsey made a sound like the lid of a jar refusing to open. Her attorney put a hand on her arm. Evan did not look at her. He looked at the judge and nodded once, as if he recognized in her something he could grow into someday, the ability to hold a room's noise and choose calmly against it. We walked out into a sky that had finally decided to be blue, the river tossing coins of light along its surface. On the steps, Evan stopped. Grandma, he said, do you think Dad would be okay with this? I looked at the scar in the stone where some long ago winter cracked it open, and spring filled the fissure with grit, and we all kept walking over it anyway. I think, I said, your father would be proud of the way you told the truth. He breathed in, and this time the breath sounded like a sail catching wind. That night, he brought his backpack into the spare room and lined his notebooks like bricks, the foundation of a small, sturdy future. I tucked the sweater back into the cedar chest, because it is our job to learn when to hold and when to put away. In bed, the house quiet, I traced with my mind that dent in the hallway shaped like a comet and thought of how impacts make marks we then live with. Some are reminders of joy, some of sorrow. All of them, if we are careful, can be turned into navigation. I am 60, and my grandson lives with me for now. And tomorrow we will plant the bulbs I bought in a moment of hope at the hardware store. Hope I hid from myself under the sink, and then, on the morning he knocked on my door, brought out as if it had been waiting there all along. The tulips will bloom after the frost has had its say. That is the nature of tulips and frost and people. I will show him how to dig holes the depth of his palm and how to space them, so they do not crowd one another. And when spring comes and they rise, simple and unapologetic, we will stand on the porch with our hands around mugs and know that some victories are not trophies. They are rooms where a boy can set down his phone, exhale, and call the place he is standing home. In the weeks that followed, our life assembled itself like a quilt from pieces that did not seem to belong together, until they warmed us. Morning became a ceremony, the clink of the sugar jar, the squeak of the back screen, Evan's footsteps overhead in a rhythm I began to know the way old sailors know tides. He left for school with the careful efficiency of someone who does not take ordinary for granted. The bus stop at the corner had always been a place I hurried past. Now I learned the names of the other kids and which ones traded baseball cards, and which ones carried music in their backpacks. I learned that Evan waited for the driver to say good morning to each passenger before he climbed the steps, as if he understood that gratitude functions best when it has an audience. On Wednesdays, he met with a counselor at school, a man named Lamont who wore bright socks that peeked out when he crossed his legs, and who said grief worked the way gardeners say soil. Evan came home with phrases that sounded like tools. I can choose my response. I can ride the wave. He wrote them on sticky notes and moved them around the frame of his mirror, building a small fence of language against nights that used to feel endless. I wanted to gather those notes and press them into a book, but I left them where he put them. Because leaving is also a way of honoring, Kelsey called twice. The first time, her voice was a controlled burn. He refuses my texts, she said, as if refusal were a crime with bail. I told her the order allowed communication only through the court's messaging app. She hung up before I could say more. The second time, a sound of unraveling in the background television too loud. Laughter that wasn't laughter. Tell him, she said, that this is not permanent. I did not answer because the truth was not tidy. Temporary had become our scaffolding. You don't praise the scaffolding while you are still climbing. We filled evenings with small repair. He helped me ray-oil the cutting board and learned the smell of mineral oil, which is clean and faintly metallic, like new promises. We took the storm windows down from the attic and washed them in the yard, leaning them against the fence where sunlight found the streaks we missed, and instructed us to try again. He asked if we could ride our bikes by the river the next Saturday, and when he said we, the pronoun landed on the porch like a fragile bird and then, finding seed, stayed. The investigation hummed along in the background like a refrigerator you only notice when the power goes out. The Guardian ad litem came by a woman named Mercy, which I had to repeat in my head twice so I didn't wear it out with a wish in it. And she sat with Evan at the small table in the nook and asked about bedtime and chores, and whether he felt safe. He told her about the steady things, the lucky coin he keeps in his pocket, the way my neighbor Mrs. Polk waves from her stoop at exactly 5:45, the smell of cinnamon on Sundays. He did not mention the recording unless prompted. He did not want his life to be a single clip replayed on loop. Mercy nodded the way people nod when they are assembling a house from a box of labeled parts, and I tried very hard not to decide whether her nods meant yes. That weekend we took the bikes beyond the usual bend where the sycamores lean, as if gossiping over the water. The air had that thin early spring quality that makes you think your lungs learned a new word. Evan's hair, grown a little long, lifted in the breeze and then settled. He found a rhythm that was not showing off but not cautious either, and I pedaled just behind him, watching the back of his jacket. The small square of cloth I had stitched into the lining with my initials and a stitched star. An old habit from when Michael was small and everything we loved needed a mark to prove it was ours. Half a mile past the bridge, the path opened into a field where the land remembers it was once prairie. And in that memory, the wind moves differently. Evan braked, put his feet down, and let the bike lean into his hip. I feel tall out here, he said. You are tall, I said. Inside and out, he looked at me sideways, the shy smile that never quite shows teeth. Dad used to tell me that feeling tall isn't about your height. It's about how much sky you know you can carry. We stood there in the middle of a field where no one could accuse us of stealing space. And I thought of Michael's hands. How they were always busy making sure things were level shelves, expectations, picture frames. Grief, which had become a familiar tenant in my chest, reached out and touched me not with sharpness but with that ache which means, blessedly, that love is still working. On Sunday afternoon, as we sorted the box of mismatched screws and nails that lives under my sink, my phone buzzed with a message from the court app, Kelsey requesting a video call. The order allowed one supervised call each week. Evan looked at me, then at the little pile of brass screws he had grouped by length. I'll do it in the kitchen, he said. We set the tablet on the counter. When the screen brightened, Kelsey appeared in a light so filtered it made her face look powdered. Evan, she said, voice already cracked with a performance I recognized like an old song on an old radio. Sweetie, he said hello, polite, a boy who has decided the ocean is too big to yell at. She asked about school, and he told her about a science lab with dry ice and the way it smoked. When the teacher dropped it into warm water, she asked if I was feeding him properly with a laugh meant to be a joke and not a test. He said yes. She asked when he was coming home. I'm home, he said, a tiny pause. The kind that tells you everything about the next 5 minutes. We'll talk about that, she said lightly. You and I will have a day, just us, and we'll reset. I don't want to reset, he said. I want to rest. She smiled in that way that cracks a little at the edges. You've always been dramatic, Mom, he said. And I felt the word move through him like a storm across a lake, bright, noisy, necessary. Please don't say I'm confused when I tell you what I want, she blinked. Who told you to say that? No one, he shook his head, and a strand of hair fell across his eyes. I'm not a team. I'm a person, she stared. For a moment I saw the girl I met at that eucalyptus arbor, the one who wanted every compliment. To be a contract. Then the expression shuddered. We're done for today, she said, and ended the call. He stood still for a beat, as if waiting for a wave to hit and then realizing it would break before it reached him. He picked up a washer, rolled it across the counter, watched it spin and lie flat. That felt like jumping into cold water, he said. It gets easier to breathe, I told him. At school, he tried out for the spring play. He did not want a lead. He wanted a part with a hat. Hats are like permission, he said. He was cast as a train conductor in a scene where 3 characters missed the same train. For different reasons. He memorized his 5 lines and then learned everyone else's lines, too. Not out of ambition, but because he liked the way the words fit together like tracks. I sat in the auditorium during rehearsal and listened to teenagers forget their cues and find them again while a patient teacher clapped beat into the air. It felt like watching a small town practice the future 2 days before the final hearing. Snow returned in one of those late gestures that remind you winter is not obligated to keep promises it never made. The tulip bed we had planted wore a white sheet. Evan stood at the window and said, they're sleeping with a blanket that afternoon. Judge Hartman's clerk called to confirm the time. I baked bread because I didn't know what else to do with my hands. The house smelled like a story I wanted to live inside. Evan came home with a flyer about a track meet and a new word, agency. He said it cautiously, like someone stepping onto ice. It's when you get to choose your own next step, he said, and I nodded, grateful for a school counselor with bright socks. At night I lay awake and thought of the curve of a gavel's handle, smooth from all the hands that have held it, trying to be firm without leaving a mark. I thought of Kelsey, who had been a child once and learned that applause is a kind of food. I thought of forgiving without forgetting, which is like walking across a creek on stone slick with algae. You can do it, but you must look where you put your feet. The morning of the hearing, Evan dressed with a care that made me want to sit on my hands, so I wouldn't ruin the moment with straightening. He chose a pale blue shirt and a tie with small anchors that Michael wore when he graduated from community college at 28. Late because life had been a series of shifts and favors in those years, when he thought school was for people who didn't work with their hands. I tied the knot and it came out clean on the first try, a small blessing with wings. We left the house early. The sky had decided, again on iron. Outside the courtroom, Kelsey stood alone. No sunglasses. Hair tied back, the bones of her face sharper than I remembered. She looked at Evan the way rain looks at windows searching for a way in. Can we talk for a second? She asked. He looked at me, and I stepped back automatically, letting him fill his own doorway. He moved closer to her, not enough to be pulled but close enough to be kind. She tried a smile that did not survive the second corner of her mouth. I am trying, she said. I know, he answered. That's part of why this is hard, she swallowed. And in that small tilt of her throat I saw a woman who had carried something heavy and didn't know how to put it down without breaking it. I'm going to say some things in there, she said. Please don't hate me for it. He shook his head. I don't hate you, he said. I just need space to like myself. The bailiff opened the door and we went in. Our seats remembered us. Our lawyer stacked our papers and breathed out once neatly. Judge Hartman looked the same, and not the same, a difference you only notice when you have sat with someone long enough to learn how their face ranges concern. Testimony circled the room like weather systems. Kelsey spoke about being alone and built a palace of facts. Our lawyer walked through each hallway and tapped the walls to show which ones were painted and which ones bore weight. The guardian ad litem recommended a plan, words like primary residence and structured visitation, and parent education class braided into a rope that, if held properly, might actually pull us forward. Evan spoke at the end at the judge's invitation, with a steadiness that made two men in suits in the back row stop whispering. I want to feel safe without having to proofread my face, he said. I want to be listened to when I'm quiet. I want to be 14 without apologizing for it. The judge listened. Then she set her hands on either side of the bench as if steadying a table before serving something hot. The court recognizes the mother's grief and her role, she said. The court also recognizes the child's voice, which has been both clear and at times constrained. The best interest of the child requires stability, predictability, and respect for his stated preference. She paused, and the pause sounded like a train deciding which track is its own. Custody is awarded to the grandmother for the next academic term, with a review set at its end. The mother will have structured visitation alternating weekends, supervised for the first 8 weeks, with midweek dinner contact via the court app scheduling tool. The mother will enroll in the parent program recommended by the guardian ad litem. Both parties are ordered to refrain from disparaging commentary about the other in the child's presence. This is not a punishment. It is a plan. The gavel tapped. The room exhaled. Mercy looked at me and nodded, not a victory nod but a bridge-building one. Kelsey sat very still, eyes on a point in the air as if she had thrown a lasso and was waiting to see what it caught. Evan's hand found mine under the edge of the table and held on, not a clutch, a consent. Outside, the snow had melted into the kind of slush that makes sidewalks honest. We walked slowly because there was nowhere urgent to be. Review at the end of term, Evan said, sounding the words to see how they fit. That's like teachers do. It means we keep doing the next right thing, I said. At home, the tulip bed had shrugged off its blanket. Green tips wrote themselves into the soil, exclamation points pretending to be blades. Evan knelt and touched one with one finger. The way you touch a sleeping cat so it knows you are here without having to wake up. Hi, he whispered to the future that evening. He sat at the kitchen table with the anchors around his neck and filled out a permission slip for the track meet. Can you sign here? He asked, and I signed exactly where the line told me because obedience to lines, it turns out, is one way to build a life you can live in. He looked at my signature. Grandma, he said, your name looks like sailboats. Your father used to say that, I told him. He grinned, a grin that allowed the day to be what it had been without making it everything. Then maybe it's true, he said, and went back to drawing a small map of the bus route on the back of the flyer, arrows steady, corners square, as if he had decided that even temporary can be navigated with the right kind of ink. By summer, the rhythm of our lives had settled into something that felt like home. Evan's laughter returned in pieces, first as a shy chuckle, later as the easy kind that fills a room without asking permission. The tulips we planted bloomed, red and yellow, bending gently but refusing to break. Each time he passed them on the porch, he touched one lightly, as if reminding himself that fragile things can still stand tall. Kelsey continued her supervised visits. Some days she tried, bringing board games or stories from work. Other days her anger slipped through. But Evan no longer folded beneath it. He listened, nodded, and then chose when to step away. His courage grew not from defiance but from knowing he had a choice. At the final review hearing, Judge Hartman spoke firmly. Evan has flourished in his grandmother's care. His wishes remain consistent. The court awards full custody to Mrs. Anna Cooper with structured visitation for his mother. The gavel tapped and with it, a weight lifted. Kelsey cried quietly, but for the first time, she did not argue. She left the courtroom with a small nod toward me, perhaps a beginning of acceptance. That night, Evan and I sat on the porch, bowls of ice cream melting faster than we could eat them. Fireflies sparked in the garden. He leaned against me and said, "Grandma, I don't feel like I'm just surviving anymore. I feel alive." I looked at him, at the boy who had carried so much and still found room to grow, and whispered, "Then we've already won." And in that moment, with tulips swaying and the stars just beginning to appear, I knew our home was no longer temporary, it was a promise kept.